welcome to Connections. I'm your host, April Healy, and Martha Blanchard is joining us. She's a first-year staff and a very good friend of mine. Hi, Martha.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I would love to ask you just a bunch of good questions.
All right, fire away.
Let's start with, you have a really good take on the older generation and them going through school ministry and receiving from younger people.
Yeah.
And so just give us your like insight to that world.
Well, I have seen that there are a lot of people in my generation that have just been going after the more.
Oh, wow.
They saw this revival, they saw Toronto, they saw things in Florida. They've seen over and over more, and they keep going after more.
That's
and they
awesome.
keep finding it. And then there's more, and they keep finding it.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many in my generation, they're like, we're not done. We're not done getting the more of God. We're not done learning more. There's new revelations, more revelations, deeper revelations that we can get no matter how old we are.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that we're really old or our life is over at all, but it's the ministry school is not just for 20-year-olds out of college wanting to find a ministry or wanting to find the next thing they're doing or the first thing they're doing.
Right.
It's really, I've seen people my age coming and saying, oh, there's so much that I can learn from these 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds that are leading and that have found things out that they didn't know they weren't supposed to find out.
Wow.
So even being in a traditional church in a very denominational background, in some ways they tell you, okay, this is the way you're supposed to believe. This is the way God is supposed to be. And then I've talked to you before and you're like, oh, people believe that? I'm like, everyone believes that, don't they?
I've definitely said that.
And then you say, no, I don't know anyone that believes that. And it's so refreshing that you don't have this paradigm you have to get past or these lies that you have to kick out to find the truth. When you've already found some truths that I've never been exposed to. And so it's really wonderful at any age. You know, there was a 72-year-old retired doctor in my first year class.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And he was amazing because I loved the way he approached all the new things we were learning. So, for instance, I would listen to something and go, does anybody really believe that? I mean, are you kidding? You guys believe this? And then I would listen some more and go, oh, yeah, that actually feels true, sounds true, and feels like love, and feels like God's love. That must be true.
Yeah.
What's all this stuff I've been believing? Let me get rid of that.
Yeah.
And trying to work through kind of the lies that we didn't know were lies, obviously, because
of course.
Nobody knows they're a lie because you're believing a lie.
Right.
So, but to realize that there are more truths and there's a deeper revelation and there's more to know about God no matter what your age is. And honestly, I got this big revelation from an 18-year-old that was in my small group.
That's amazing.
And we were just asking a question like, well, how do you see God? And she said, like this. I was like, what?
What did she say?
Just her revelation of like, here's what the Father's like, here's what the Son's like, here's what the Holy Ghost is like. I can't even describe it because it was so out of my box, out of my experience. I'm like, you're 18 and you see God in this deep, personal, loving way. I didn't even know you could.
Wow.
I thought God was supposed to be like that.
Right.
And I was really happy that God didn't have to be like that because it wasn't a lot of fun to serve that God anyway.
Yeah. How did you, what kind of growing up did you feel like he was? Meaning like that? What do you mean? Like stoic or?
Very denominational, very traditional. There's God up on his throne. Okay. He's up there watching over you, making sure if you do something wrong that he, slaps you around a little so you get it right.
Okay.
And make sure you do it right. If you don't do it right, you'll have consequences or whatever.
Right.
It's not much fun to serve, but I served him. And I served him well, and I did everything I was supposed to do that I knew I could do most of the time. But it wasn't a lot of fun.
Right.
And that's why the revelation of what was going on in this particular culture was so exciting. Because God's just love, and he loves you, and he's good. He really is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Really is.
I've seen that over and over, people in my generation being able to look at the younger generation and go, oh, they just get to believe it. This is amazing.
Wow.
I want to do that too.
That's really cool. And I think you're doing well at that. Like,
I'm excited about it.
yeah, since I've known you, you've just grown leaps and bounds.
I've changed a lot of the way I see God. And it's been a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about women, like how you saw, what you were taught about women in ministry, and then what you've learned over the course of that thinking and what you think now.
Yeah. It's been, and I would say the majority of people that were raised in the kinds of churches I was raised in, the man was the one that had authority. The man was the one that got to teach. The woman just sort of followed in his footsteps.
Okay.
They really didn't have a voice. And if they did have a voice, they had a voice getting to teach the kids.
Okay.
Or getting to maybe have a women's Bible study, but that was it. And if they wanted to talk to the pastor, they had to go through their husband. If they wanted any position, it was really just with the children, because women can't teach anything. Can't teach the men.
Yeah.
That's the background I'm from.
Right. This is what you learned growing up.
That's my background. And it was pretty strict and pretty prescribed. I didn't feel a lot of freedom, but I knew that they were right, and that's what they taught, so I should believe it. Didn't matter what I felt.
Sure.
And it was kind of powerless. And I've talked to a lot of women from that same background that felt like they didn't have a voice, and they felt powerless. Like, I don't get to do what I want. I don't get to be me. I have to be this.
Sure.
It was funny because even in second year, the person that led second year was a woman. And I had a little trouble for a while saying, what is she doing teaching? Here she is teaching the director of a school of ministry, teaching all these men and women, and she was young, and she was, a lovely person, but she was a woman. And just trying to work through that, like, what is this culture that allows women to be themselves and to have a voice and to lead and to be discipled and to be mothers and have an authority over even men.
Yeah.
And it was pretty surprising and actually confusing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And so but now you feel like, how do you feel when you see women
Actually, I
teaching?
think one shift was a book by Chris Valentin, who wrote, honestly, pretty well-researched book where he took a lot of those scriptures that I'd been taught, women cover your head, women don't speak in church.
Sure.
All these things, and took the cultural context, brought in some biblical context, and showed how that had been shifted over time by people in the church to keep women quiet.
Wow.
And just like in any family, you can't have just fathers in a family and no mothers. That's a weird family.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've been to some weird churches that just had fathers and no mothers. And I think they weren't as balanced as they would be. So just figuring out some of that cultural context and seeing that the scriptural ideas somewhat from that book that I read, and just processing those with the Lord and realizing that I do have a voice.
Yeah.
And women can have a voice, and they're not being, there's not the spirit of Jezebel just because they have an opinion.
Right.
Which is what I heard.
That's how you grew up.
That's how I grew up in the Christian. I didn't become a Christian until I was in college.
Okay, got it.
So those kinds of churches, growing up, that's different. It's a whole different story.
Gotcha. Well, Martha, thanks for joining us. You have such good stuff to say as a woman. Thank you. And you have such good revelations. And I just absolutely love every part of you. I love that you're a part of our life and a part of our school of ministry. And we're just so happy to have you.
Well, thanks. Thanks for letting me come and chat.
You're welcome. And guys, thanks so much for joining us. This was such a fun time with Martha. We just absolutely love, 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 and adore her. And you guys come back for the next one.